Where do we begin? Well, it's possible to dive right into the world of Azeroth and go from there. But really, I feel that it's more important to go back a bit farther. Maybe even to a time when Azeroth wasn't in the spotlight. So, I say we start at the very, very beginning. Before there was life, before even the cosmos took form, there were two opposing forces, light and void. Now, light drifted in the form of a prismatic sea, spreading nothing but joy and hope. As this light expanded, some of its energies faded, which left behind pockets of nothingness. From the absence of light came what we know as the void. Now, if the light was filled with joy and hope, you can only imagine what encompassed the void. It was a dark and vampiric force with a single purpose: to devour all energy. So when the light and void clashed in the series of catastrophic explosions, well, that only ruptured the fabric of creation and gave birth to a new realm. This is when the physical universe was born. When we think of World of Warcraft, we think of the planet Azeroth. But this place that we've adventured in for years upon years is but a small part of the big picture. Really, it's just a speck of sand in what we know as the Great Beyond. The Great Beyond is the physical universe. It's literal space filled with stars, worlds, and civilizations, all created from the energy produced from the clash of light and void. On the flip side, the most unstable energies created an astral dimension known as the Twisting Nether. This separated reality exists outside the borders of the physical universe. It's a completely different realm that occasionally would break the barrier and seep into the Great Beyond, sneaking its way into reality and warping the creations that live there. Not only did the clash of light and void create the physical and astral realms, but shards of light were literally flung out into the Great Beyond. These sparks of light would then combine with worlds and create what we know as creatures, both wondrous and terrible. The most common forms of life were the elemental spirits, beings made of fire, water, earth, and air. These elemental creatures were native to nearly every physical world within the Great Beyond. Now and then, clouds of fractured light gathered and gave life to beings with far greater power and potential. One of those beings were called the Naaru, creatures filled with an immense amount of holy energy. And as they gazed out across the universe, they saw a realm of limitless possibilities in which they could spread hope and nurture life wherever they could find it. The other beings that were created from these sparks of life were the Titans. Their spirits, which are known as world souls, formed deep in the center of a small number of planets. These world souls slept for ages, and when they awoke as living worlds. Now, this doesn't mean that the Titans themselves are planets floating through space, but rather that they're cosmic entities birthed from a planet. The difference between the Naaru and the Titans is this: the Naaru set out to safeguard all of life, while the Titans wandered the Great Beyond, seeking for others of their kind. So who was the first Titan to wake from its slumber? Legend states that it was Aman'Thul, but nobody knows when or why. What's really sad about Aman'Thul is that he was alone. No other Titan had emerged from their slumber yet. This sparked him to begin exploring the Great Beyond, searching for other Titans to be woken up. And he did, in fact, find other worlds that held sleeping Titans inside. Once found, he nurtured the newly found planets and raised the Titan from its sleep. And those who woke up devoted themselves to the search for others of their kin. Aman'Thul and his siblings, or rather the other Titans, later became known as the Pantheon. Now, the Pantheon was aligned with order and stability, possessed a natural affinity to the latent magic in the universe. And they knew that they were powerful, but they bound themselves to a code of temperance toward any civilization that they encountered. Order was crucial, and they learned that really quick when it came to finding other sleeping Titans. They followed a certain protocol when dealing with a world that held a sleeping Titan inside, or rather a world soul. First, they would calm down the elemental population, that being creatures of earth, fire, wind, and water. Then they would reshape the world, forming mountains, rivers, and seeding a myriad of life forms across the land. In doing this, they hoped to call forth the world's soul and bring it to maturity. But most of the time, the worlds that the Titans visited proved inert. Even if a world was visited and it didn't contain a world soul at its core, the Pantheon still vowed to maintain and protect it. To help do this, they established primitive life forms to uphold the integrity of the world. But as a failsafe, the Pantheon also placed colossal machines in the surface of the planets that they had shaped. These machines could be used in a way so that the Titans could monitor the state of everything happening on that particular world, and should the need arise, purge the planet of all life should the evolutionary paths lead to disorder and chaos. This is when Aman'Thul called upon a mysterious race known as the Constellar. These large humanoid-shaped constellations observed the many worlds that were ordered by the Titans. They stayed vigilant for any sign of change, instability, decline, pretty much the downfall of the evolution of life on a planet. And it was the Constellar that would initiate the failsafe procedure to wipe out all life from a world in hopes to reset the evolutionary process. As time passed, the Pantheon found fewer and fewer world souls. They were rare, but that didn't stop them from continuing their search. The Titans knew that the universe was vast beyond measure. Even after epochs or epochs or however you want to pronounce it, they had only searched a small corner of creation within the great beyond. And while all of this was going on, the Pantheon had no idea what was lurking in the distant reaches of the universe. Now, if you've played World of Warcraft for any significant amount of time, then you've heard of something called the Old Gods. But what's talked about less are the Void Lords. When the Great Beyond came to be, dark spirits looked to twist reality into a realm of eternal torment. These dark spirits were known as the Void Lords. As the Pantheon searched for their kin, the Void Lords watched and grew jealous of their power. So, they figured that the next best thing would be to corrupt one of the members of the Pantheon into an instrument of their will. In essence, they wanted to create a powerful, dark Titan. But something held the Void Lords back from achieving their goal. They struggled to manifest themselves in the physical universe. Whatever influence they could seep into reality warped and changed some of the lower life forms found on certain worlds. But regarding a Titan, a member of the Pantheon, it just didn't seem to work. They couldn't corrupt one. So it was back to the drawing board for the Void Lords. And in the end, they decided that the only way to corrupt a Titan would be to start the process when they're most vulnerable, while it was still sleeping as a world soul. But the Void Lords didn't know which worlds held a sleeping Titan at its core. Now, since they couldn't leave the twisting nether, they took a chance and created dark creatures that would hurl out into the physical universe in hopes of crashing into a planet. And if they were lucky, that planet would contain a world soul. These dark creatures would later be known as the Old Gods. Now, the Titans were aware of void energies, but they had no clue that the Void Lords and the Old Gods were even in existence. And this is because the Pantheon's attention was fixated on a much more immediate threat: demons. Creatures that had been born from the twisting nether. Creatures that hungered for nothing less than the destruction of all life in the universe. Demons are very passionate when it comes to pushing the boundaries of their power, regardless of the consequences. Many of these creatures embraced the all-consuming powers of fel magic. And it wasn't long before a lot of them clawed their way into the physical universe from the twisting nether, only to terrorize mortal civilizations and create chaos on many different worlds. Now, demons came in all shapes and sizes. You're probably familiar with the two-headed void hounds, or even the mindless amalgamations such as the abyssals and infernals. But among these creatures were the greater demons, the Nathrazim, or also known as Dreadlords. These demons dedicated their existence to the mastering of shadow magic, And apart from that, they enjoyed infiltrating mortal civilizations, sowing unrest, and turning nation against nation. In short, they loved to stir the pot. And once these societies fell apart and crumbled from within, the Dreadlords would corrupt the population and twist the innocents into new horrific breeds of demons. Pit Lords, another demon type, took a more direct approach of conquering worlds. They simply brutalized and tortured mortals who got in their way. Pit Lords would even enslave the lesser demons from the Twisting Nether and use them as fodder to besiege the mortal civilizations of the Great Dark Beyond. Now, the Pantheon soon learned about the demonic incursions that were starting up, and they feared that the demons would disrupt the Pantheon's quest to find and awaken world souls. So what did they do? In order to handle the situation, they let loose their greatest warrior. They let loose a titan named Sargeras. Out of all the members of the Pantheon, Sargeras displayed unmatched courage and strength. And because of that, he was the best choice in order to eradicate the demons that had slipped into the physical universe from the Twisting Nether. He didn't waste any time. Sargeras moved quickly to worlds that were erratic with volatile energies. These places were heavily influenced by the Twisting Nether, so much that it had spilled into the physical universe, which allowed a large number of demons to manifest. For ages, Sargeras traveled to numerous worlds, fighting to protect the mortal inhabitants from the invading demons. Not only did he battle, but he also witnessed the demise of entire civilizations, as they were warped into depraved aberrations. Because of this, Sargeras began to feel an overwhelming sense of helplessness. Nevertheless, he defeated his foes, winning victory after victory. And as he engaged with these demons more and more, he realized that some had learned to wield void energies. This led to Sargeras discovering the existence of the Void Lords and how they were spreading corruption through the cosmos. This concerned him, and he thought, what were the powers of the Void planning? And what could their existence mean for the universe? While Sargeras continued his war against the demons, the Pantheon continued their progress without hindrance, searching for sleeping titans, ordering new worlds as they progressed. Seeing life bloom on these planets and being free of any demonic presence gave Sargeras a sense of satisfaction. He loved life, and because of that, he so desperately wanted to confront the Void Lords and undo whatever plan they were working on. Everything seemed to be going as planned, until the demons redoubled their efforts. They began engulfing more worlds in death and destruction. This is when Sargeras realized that he had fought many of these demons before, but how was that possible? Well, it came as a surprise that after these demons were defeated in the physical universe, their spirits returned to the Twisting Nether, only to be reborn in new bodies. What Sargeras didn't know is that the only way to truly destroy a demon is to kill them while in the Twisting Nether, or in an area of the Great Dark saturated with the Twisting Nether's volatile energies. Sargeras only knew that his current tactics were not working. Killing demons did nothing. He needed to find a way to contain them. Now the Pantheon was concerned, so they sent another Titan to help Sargeras out. His name was Agramar, and he wasn't experienced in battle, but he was a quick learner. Because of this, he earned Sargeras' admiration and became his trusted lieutenant, and for many millennia, they fought side by side as an unstoppable force against the demonic onslaught. Now that Agramar could hold his own in battle, this gave time for Sargeras to study the properties of the Twisting Nether. He hadn't quite figured out the realm's volatile energies, but he managed to manipulate and shape some of them. With this knowledge, he forged a prison within the Twisting Nether called Mardoom, or also known as the Plane of Banishment. It would act as an impregnable pocket dimension from which nothing could escape. Now, demons would no longer be reborn after being defeated. They would simply be contained in this prison for eternity. As Sargeras and Agramar's campaign continued, the prison became overflowed with demons and their destructive fell energies. After a while, these energies became so great that they began tearing through the veil between the twisting nether and the physical universe. The prison began appearing in distant parts of the Great Dark as a burning, verdant star. But overall, their campaign brought peace to the cosmos. Demonic incursions would remain as a constant threat, but over time they became a rare event. The Titans prospered, and life flourished. And wouldn't it be nice to say that all was well, and that's how the story ends? But that wouldn't be exciting. From here, Sargeras and Agrimar decided that they could hunt down and contain more of these demon incursions if they split up. This way, more worlds would be protected if they worked separately, only calling on each other if the need was dire. So, they went their separate ways. This is when Sargeras discovered the full horror of the Void Lord's plans. He had been drawn to a very remote corner of the Great Beyond, only to find a world consumed by the Void. This would be his first interaction with the old gods, as he found them festering on the world's surface. But this wasn't just any world. Sargeras quickly realized that a Titan was sleeping within. He heard the world soul's dreams, which is how he found out. The terrifying thing is that these dreams were nightmares, not the pleasant dreams that world souls usually have. The old god's tendrils had buried deep into the planet, enveloping the slumbering Titan's spirit in shadow. So great was the void on this planet that it drew the attention of many dreadlords who traveled there to bask in the dark power. Sargeras was able to capture and interrogate one. It revealed what it knew about the old gods, the intentions of the Void Lords, and how if the Void succeeded in corrupting a sleeping Titan, it would awaken as an unstoppable dark creature. No power in creation, not even the Pantheon, could stand against it. This warped Titan, if woken up, would consume all matter and energy in the universe, bringing every mote of existence under the Void Lord's will. Now, Sargeras had seen a lot of hardships, but never did he experience fear until this moment. He suddenly realized that while the Pantheon was searching for world souls, so were the Void Lords. With rage and anger, Sargeras killed the Dreadlord with a single blow, then turned his attention to the blackened world in front of him. His heart ached with sorrow. He knew that there was only one way to keep the Dark Titan from rising. With a slash of his sword, he split the world in two. The explosion consumed the old gods and their void energies, but also killed the sleeping Titan within. Sargeras immediately returned to the Pantheon and summoned Agrimar to his side. He gave a report on what he saw, and with no surprise, the members of the Pantheon were stunned. But even more so, they were upset at Sargeras' actions. They chastised him for killing a Titan. They argued that had they been called to help, maybe the world soul could have been purged of its corruption. But really, there was no convincing them that this was the only way to handle the situation. The Pantheon didn't have first-hand experience with the Void and demons like Sargeras and Agrimar did. They hadn't seen what they saw, especially what Sargeras experienced with the nearly corrupted world soul. They argued about how to deal with the Void Lords. Sargeras feared that if the old gods had corrupted one world soul, they might have corrupted many others as well, and that it might be too late to stop them. This is when Sargeras would become the villain that we know him for. He expressed his fear that existence was flawed. This is something that he realized when he encountered the old gods, and that only by burning away all of creation could the Titans stand a chance at overthrowing the goals of the Void Lords. In his mind, even a lifeless universe is better than one ruled by the Void. He thought life had taken root in the cosmos once before. Perhaps after the physical universe was scoured of corruption, life would take root once again. The Pantheon was horrified. Eonar, the Lifebinder, reminded Sargeras that they had sworn to protect all living things whenever possible. Systemic extinction could never be warranted, no matter the situation. Even Agramar stood against his mentor, arguing that there must be another way to defeat the Void Lords. He urged Sargeras to abandon his dark plan and reason out another solution. But that was it. He had made up his mind. Sargeras, feeling betrayed, stormed away from the other Titans, vowing that he would expel the Void Lord's corruption himself. This would be the last time that the Pantheon would see him as one of their own. For ages, the Pantheon continued to search for more world souls. Sadly, they didn't find any. They wondered at times if their search was in vain, but they continued to press forward, knowing in their hearts that more world souls existed. Though they didn't know it, a new world was taking shape in an isolated corner of the Great Dark. Even more so, deep within this world's core, the spirit of a mighty and noble Titan stirred to life. One day, this new world would be known as Azeroth. While this new Titan formed, elemental spirits roamed the surface. And over time, they became more erratic and destructive. But why is this? What stirred the elements into a frenzy? Well, because the world's soul was so vast, it had drawn in and consumed the fifth element, that being spirit. Without its presence, Azeroth's elemental spirits descended into chaos. So what remained was earth, fire, wind, and water, each led by their respective lords that reigned over the lesser elements on the planet. Those being Alkhair, the Wind Lord, famous for sending minions to spy on his enemies and sow distrust among their ranks; Ragnaros, the Fire Lord, who embraced brute force to take out his foes; Therazane, the Stone Mother, known for her impenetrable fortifications; and Neptulon, the Tidehunter, who raised tidal waves to combat his opponents. Basically, all four of them hated each other and waged war for an untold millennia. Dominion over Azeroth was in a constant shift between factions. Then, the old gods arrived. Crashing down into Azeroth's surface from the Great Dark, the old gods embedded themselves in different locations across the world. They were large, multi-eyed, disgusting mounds of writhing shadows that posed nothing more than a direct threat when looked at. Apart from the corruption that spread from their landing sites, these cancerous beings also were in the works on digging deep to the world's soul below. Not only did their corruption spread, but it also gave rise to two new races. The Noraki, also known as the Faceless Ones, and the Akir, insectoids of incredible strength and resilience. Both of these races served their masters, that being the old gods, with fanatical loyalty. But what was their use? Why create these races to begin with? Well, first off, they were to expand the borders of the old gods' dominions. The Faceless Ones were tasked to erect towering citadels and temple cities around their masters, since the old gods were set in place and couldn't be moved. The greatest of these fortifications was built around Yasharaj, the most powerful and wicked of the old gods, who was located in the center of Azeroth. Oh, by the way, since we haven't talked about it yet, this is what Azeroth originally looked like. Very different from what you've seen in the game, but we'll go over this more in the future. As these dark cities rose, the old god's dominion would spread and become known as the Black Empire. It didn't take long for the elemental lords to realize what was going on. Knowing the threat that had arrived on their homeworld, they band together for the first time to work in unison against a common enemy. Al-Akir's Tempest joined with Ragnaros' fiery servants to create monstrous cyclones of flame. Therazane raised jagged rock walls to halt her enemies and shatter their temple cities, while Neptulon and his tidal minions swept in, crushing the Faceless Ones and the Akir between the raised stone. But in spite of their power, they could not overcome the Black Empire. No matter how many of the old gods' minions they killed, more and more would spawn. In the end, the old gods enslaved the elementals and their lords. And with that, the Black Empire crept over the surface of Azeroth, spiraling it into an abyss of suffering and death. Meanwhile, Agramar had continued what Sargeras had begun. He eradicated all signs of demonic influence from one world to the next. Even though he bore the full weight of this task alone, he never gave up. Somewhere deep inside, he believed that Sargeras would one day return and see that the Pantheon's cause was right. It was then, during his long and lonely journeys, that he sensed the tranquil dreams of a slumbering world soul. A world that the Pantheon had yet discovered. A planet that would later be named Azeroth. The spirit inside of this world was so mighty that Agramar could feel its dreams, even through the corruption that was covering it. When he arrived at its location, horror seized him. It was the same thing that Sargeras saw with the world that he had split in two. Except the tendrils of the old gods had not yet reached the world's soul. There was still time, but the clock was ticking. Agramar quickly sought counsel with the Pantheon, informed them of his discovery, which also confirmed that Sargeras had been right about the Void Lords and their plans. Agramar urged the other Titans to take action before Azeroth succumbed to the Void. Aonar was quick to back him up, and she compelled the other Pantheon members to think of the world's potential. This sleeping Titan could exceed even Sargeras' might. The one world soul that could be capable of extinguishing the Void Lords once and for all. Knowing this, it was a unanimous decision to save Azeroth, no matter the cost. The plan? To travel to Azeroth's location, every member of the Pantheon, and purge the Black Empire that had consumed it. But they couldn't do it directly themselves. We have to remember that the Titans, or the members of the Pantheon, were colossal beings. Even their physical interaction with the planet could destroy the world's soul beneath the surface. So, Agramar proposed that they create mighty constructs to act in their place. Under the guidance of the forger Khaz'goroth, one of the members of the Pantheon, they crafted an army of enormous servants from the crust of Azeroth itself. These new races would be known as the Aesir and the Vanir. The Aesir were made from metal and could command the powers of storms, while the Vanir were formed from stone and could control portions of the earth. Together, they would be known as the Titanforged. A few of these raised servants were imbued with powers to lead the rest of the Titanforged. These were the Keepers, which I'm sure you've heard of before. Though they would develop their own personalities over time, they would forever bear the mark and abilities of their makers. Aman'Thul gifted some of his abilities to High Keeper Ra and Keeper Odin. Khaz'goroth bestowed his mastery over the earth and forging to Keeper Arcadus. Golganeth granted Keepers Thorm and Hodir command over the storms and skies. Aonar gave Keeper Freya control over Azeroth's flora and fauna. And lastly, Agramar imparted his strength and courage to Keeper Tyr, who became the greatest warrior of the Titanforged. Now the Pantheon was ready. War was at their doorstep. The time to shatter the Black Empire and free Azeroth from its corruption had finally arrived. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. I am very, very excited to continue talking about the lore of World of Warcraft from the beginning and going onward. If you like this content, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time when we find out what happens in the Tales of Azeroth.